Hello and welcome to Module 2. In Module 2, the readings for the week is Chapter 16, which is Service and the Bottom Line. Service has an important role to play in the profitability of a company, and it does so for many reasons. And what we're going to see in the readings this week is the model that really shows all the different variables associated with the customer buying experience and how positive experiences due to services can lead to a stronger bottom line. Let's take a look at the elements one by one. First of all, we see that there's a direct relationship between service and profitability. You may not think of that because it may seem as an intangible, but it's actually been measured empirically. There are offensive and defensive effects of attracting more customers. We're going to see what they are. To me, it's coming into football season, so this reminds me that you have to have a good offense as well as a good defense. Offense is attracting more customers. Defense is preventing them from leaving. Also, you have to consider customer perceptions of service quality and purchase intention. And to do that, you have to understand what drives service quality, customer retention, and profits. And since many services are offered by employees, you have to make sure you have very good and very capable and happy employees in order to produce happy customers. There's also ways to keep track of how you're doing with services, and that's one way to do that is through the balanced scorecard. So let's have a look. First of all, the readings for Chapter 16 point out that there is a direct relationship between service and profits, and it's a linear relationship that the better the service, the better the profits. But how does that play out in terms of the details? Well, if you have good service, you're going to increase your market share, you're going to improve your reputation, and you can charge a premium for what you do. Do you always want to pay rock bottom for something and accept poorer service, or would you be willing to pay a little bit more if service came with it? Empirical evidence suggests we are willing to pay a better premium for firms that offer good services. All of this combines to greater sales, and higher sales leads to higher profits. Let's break that down on the defensive side. Customer retention. We have lower cost, we have volume of purchases, a price premium, and word of mouth. So if we keep the customers we've already got, we don't have to spend as much money to go get new ones. It's much lower cost to hold on to the ones you have than to spend money to advertise more to go get back customers that you lost. You also have the opportunity to charge more. One reason price competition exists is because you have the possibility of losing a customer to go somewhere else. So you have to compete with that somewhere else. However, if the customer is going to stay because they like what you're delivering, especially the service component, you can charge more from what you offer, and they're happy to pay it because they like the service. This all leads to higher margins. Higher margins lead to higher profits. So once again, if we look at offensive, we see increased sales, and increased sales lead to higher profits. And then defensive, we see better margins, and those better margins lead to higher profits. So we have a virtuous circle here. The text goes on to discuss top box scores, and I'm sure you've seen survey scales that you may choose from box 1 through box 5. The lowest box meaning not very satisfied at all, whereas the top boxes you tick off would say you're very highly satisfied. That's what's being referred to here with top box customers. Top boxes, 64% were very satisfied. The second box, somewhat satisfied, and bottom box is neutral to very satisfied. Notice there's a 44-point drop between top box and second box customers, and a 55-point drop between top box and second box customers. So what does this imply? That if your customers are very satisfied, they'll definitely repurchase and definitely would recommend. But if they're not very satisfied, there's a big drop in their intent to repurchase and their intent to recommend to others. So something bears strong consideration. This shows conclusively you satisfy your customers well, they will come back, they will recommend others. What about behavioral intentions? First of all, we've already discussed the customer retention, how that improves margins. But if your behavior intention is to return and purchase again, then that also increased sales. So they're mutually reinforcing. What are the drivers of service quality, customer retention, and profits? You see, service quality is related to the service encounter, and the service quality leads to behavior intentions. Behavior intentions lead to customer retention, and that leads to profit. So what we see in Chapter 16 is the centrality of the service encounter, which we will study in more detail throughout the course, but the better experience that the customer enjoys during that encounter, the better could be said to be the quality of the service, and then that drives behavior, and that leads to retaining customers. The balanced scorecard is a way to measure how well you're doing in terms of services. I will let you read this in more detail, but the balanced scorecard looks at financial, customer, operational, and innovation and learning perspectives on your service offerings. But a key principle on the operational perspective, just to your right, is do it right the first time, and do it right on time, and being responsive. You know, in service, it's perishable, you can't inventory it, so you have one shot to do it right. So getting your operations right is essential. Here's the overall model that pulls offensive and defensive marketing together. So defensive side is about customer retention. The offensive side is about sales. We see margins improve, we see sales increase, and therefore more profits. So given that this is so obvious, you would think that there would be companies out here that would be better at service. You know, as an example, I had problems with a cable TV provider, and I complained about it a few times and didn't get anywhere, and every time I'd call back, no one had any record that they'd ever talked to me before, didn't want to upgrade me. It got to be such an issue, then I just dropped them and went to another provider, in this case DirecTV. So it's an indication, it goes to show you that if someone would have reached out a little bit more, that's a long-term revenue stream they could have held on to. Plus word of mouth, you know, I could have told others this is where you need to stay. So it's a direct personal experience I've had that poor service led to a loss of sales and loss of margins, because you know, I'm living in a neighborhood where there's extensive cable TV plant already in place. All the cabling, all the wires. Well, going to my house, it's just dead cable, not providing anything. It's a cost that's still on their books, but they're not getting any revenue against it, so their margins go down. So, good example. What about a fast food example? Notice how measures that matter most begin with the people. It's important that you select the right people and you satisfy those employees. And then when employees are satisfied, they add value. That in turn satisfies customers. Customers return, and your profitability gets better. This, to me, helps me to understand why Starbucks recently announced that they would give free, they had a partnership with, I believe it was Arizona State University, to give their employees educational opportunities. This is one way to keep employees happy and satisfied, and this in turn would bleed over into customers who come to Starbucks. So you can see Starbucks didn't necessarily do that out of the goodness of their heart, but they understood this equation. You keep your employees happy, the service experiences will improve, and that will lead to return customers and overall better profitability due to better margins and higher sales. So that's it for Chapter 16, our readings for Module 2. So once we look at the details of Chapter 16 and understand the bottom line component of service, then we will start examining in more detail the GAPS model of service quality to pick apart all the different areas where service can go wrong, and we'll do that through later modules. But I think it's always good to start off with understanding that why should you do this? Because it's essential to driving profitability for the business. So let's move on now to Module 2, Service and the Bottom Line.